ऑन हुआ है नहीं है माइक की नहीं. Hello, welcome to the third round of the second International Grandmaster Chess Championship at Indore. The first edition of this event was in 2022, and last year it wasn't an international tournament in Indore, but there was a National Under-9 Championship. These tournaments are being organized at the IPS Academy Indore, and this time the second edition has a great response from all over the world. 4 continents are being represented. Of course, Asia, we have a large contingent from India, but other continents which are participating. USA, we have a player from USA. South America, we have a player from Peru. In Africa, we have a player from Egypt and Nigeria and many countries. And Asia, of course, Vietnam, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Philippines, Iran, and so many countries. So 16 countries are participating in the field of 131 players. We have 10 grandmasters, 2 women grandmasters, and 25 international masters. The tournament is being sponsored by various organizations. I think the prominent ones are the Indore Waste Management and Red Cross Society of Indore, and HDFC Bank, Mega Developers, Kirloskar Brothers, and many others. A very interesting tournament with a top seed grandmaster from India. That's P. Inyan is the top seed grandmaster. The second seed is from Russia, Boris Savchenko, and the third seed is Fedorov from also from Russia. The Russian players are not allowed to participate in the team championships, but in individual tournaments there is no bar, and we see a good fight between the top Indian players and the top Russian players here. Let's see how the games have actually begun. On the top board, we have International Master Kushagra Mohan from Bangalore playing against top seed Inyan of Tamil Nadu. Let's see how the game has gone. A Sicilian Naidorf variation. This is the Sicilian defense, and we have Inyan going for the Kushagra Mohan going for the open variation, pawn into pawn, knight into pawn, and knight f6 knight. This is called the Naidorf variation, a very flexible variation played by almost all the top players. The great players which really made it as a main weapon were Bobby Fischer and Garry Kasparov. They played most of their games in this system, a very sharp system, and let's see how the game takes place. One of the not so common variation which has also become very popular these days and played by none other than Carlsen and Anand. Anand over 2 decades back, and it has a lot of theory has developed in this. The sharpest variation, the pawn with e5. Slower variation would be to move the pawn 1 square to e6, but yeah, e5, and a standard variation g4. There was a different option to play as well that could have started with bishop g5, but this looks like a logical way, and black stops the halt while black plays h6, stopping the advanced g5. The purpose of this move is to push the pawn further, thereby driving away the black knight, and then white knight could occupy the central square d5. So the purpose of this variation is to play g5. So black stops it, and it's not easy for white to get a pawn at g5, almost impossible now. So rook g1. So instead of getting a pawn at g5, white decides to open up the game and start attack against g7 and f7 points. Too early, one would say, for an attack, but yes, it's all been analyzed, and an interesting variation. And now queen c7, I think, perhaps a new move. Let's see what happens if white tries to win immediately with knight d5. If white plays knight into d5, black plays queen into d5, then for white's knight d5, black takes knight into d5, white takes queen into d5, attacking the rook on a8 and pawn on f7. Okay, so moves have been played. Sorry for the delayed transmission here. I think knight d5 was not possible here directly, as we can see. At this position, white played bishop e3 and not knight d5, as we were discussing, because of tactical reasons arising from knight into d5, queen into d5, bishop into g5, and the rook was, it was not possible to capture the rook, but white played bishop e3 and bishop b7, and now queen d2. So knight bd7, white has long castled, and there comes b4, driving away the knight. Moving the knight to a normal square would lead to loss of e4 pawn, so knight goes and blocks the pawn, knight into d5, pawn into d5, knight f6, a standard position where white is trying to attack quicker than black can, but fundamentally black's position is sound. And let's see if nothing happens, if white doesn't get a successful attack, then black is likely to get an advantage. Okay, interesting sacrifice is possible here. F into e5 would have been an interesting option. F d into e5, then d6. So f into e5 could be met with rook c8 perhaps, and the c2 point is weak. So interesting variation could be f e5, rook c8, and then e into f6, queen c2 check. White would be losing the game. So king b1, safeguarding the king. White's idea is to safeguard the king before launching the attack. Black king is now stuck in the center, and white has to try for an attack. A successful attack could give white a full point, and if white fails to conduct an attack in a successful manner, then probably white would have a lot of weaknesses. In this position, if we remove the queens, black could be better, but it's not easy, and we have a tricky situation where now Inyan has started thinking for his next move. Let's come to next board, where Grandmaster Savchenko is playing against Indonesian player Dilshan, and interesting opening. We see a lot of Rosolumo attack in this tournament. We had a Rosolumo attack in the previous tournament. This variation, putting the bishop at b5 against Sicilian defense, is known as Rosolumo attack. And let's see how it goes. Rosolumo was a Italian player who was famous for his attacking skills, and he usually played this system aiming at quicker development. And once you have completed the development, black king would still, once white has completed the development of the king side and put the rook on e file, then black king would still be in center, so white would like to launch an attack immediately. So white gives up a bishop for a knight, a tempo. It looks that white is wasting a lot of moves, 2 bishop moves and quite a few pawn moves, but it isn't so. It's a very interesting opening. We have at a very elementary stage this opening. Black has offered a pawn. If white takes knight into pawn, then black queen could come to d4 and a completely equal ending would come, or rather a little better for black. So surely the pawn is capturing the pawn is not good. The normal course here is d3 for white. We'll see as the games how the game proceeds. We'll go to next game. There we have another Russian grandmaster playing against Vietnamese Nguyen. So this is a queen pawn opening, and either black could go with a King's Indian defense or Runfield Indian defense. Only 2 famous openings are possible from this opening. Let's see how the things go. And there is a bishop developed and castle. We have now a standard fianchetto variation of the opening. An interesting move by Fedorov. This is generally common among the Russian players, whereas all the other players from Western world and even Garry Kasparov generally opted for a central break with e5 and not with c5. But those who belong to Bronstein Boleslavsky school of Russian chess, they prefer to play with c5 and go into a sort of Benoni setup. So we have a fianchetto line of Benoni coming now, and the game has, from the King's Indian defense, it has been transposed into a Benoni variation, Benoni opening, where there are 2 moves for black, rook e8 and bishop g4 being more accurate here. a6, yes, always a possibility, because black threatens to play b5 and expand on the queen side. Black has a majority on the queen side, and if black is able to push the pawns on the queen side, white pieces would be driven away. So white tries to stop the majority, hold the majority. Again, bishop g4 would be an option, rook e8, and the move chosen, knight d7, also a standard move. Bishop f4, immediately attacking the pawn, queen c7 and h3, safeguarding. The system became popular for black when in 1982 I was lucky to watch this game in the Lausanne Olympiad in Switzerland, where young Garry Kasparov with black defeated the then world number 2 Viktor Korchnoi in a nice game. And it was at that time, perhaps at that stage, it wasn't believed that black's position was really good. But after that game, this became a popular system. And though one would say that white does have a slight advantage, it's not easy. In Fischer's words, Bobby Fischer said, when asked opinion about this opening, Benoni, modern Benoni, Fischer opined that if God plays with God, then God with white should win. But surely the game is between 2 human beings, and we'll have a very interesting game. Although I prefer white here, but various games, brilliant games have been won by black. Let's move to the next table, where we have international master Neela Shah is playing against woman grandmaster PV Nandira. Strong players, and both of them have done very well at different levels. Nandila has even played for India many times in the age group, and she has played for the country in the chess Olympiad held in Mahabalipuram in 2022, July-August. So strong, experienced players with good sense of chess and good tournament experience, great calculating abilities and fighting spirit. We are going to see a very interesting game here. The game is being played in the standard King's Indian defense. We'll quickly go through the moves. As we said, similar moves to last game. This wasn't played in the other game. So here we have a different system. White wants to play a closed game and black wants to create some counterplay. So White has a space advantage. White has freedom to move the pieces more easily because white pawns are advanced better, which means that more space, more board room for the pieces. Black has less board room, so black would try to open up the game, create some space by a pawn break f7, f5, or trying to exchange a few pieces. Let's see how the things stand here, and knight f3, bishop d7. So this is also going to be a slow game, rather probably slower than the Benoni game which we just saw. And we have again a standard position where players are taking their own time to make a plan. The opening phase is over. Players got a position which was familiar to them, and now there's the next phase, the most difficult phase in a game of chess, the middle game, where you need to plan your warfare strategy, and you also need to plan your warfare strategy, and you also need to plan your exact moves, because you make a good plan which is mathematically, arithmetically not good, then you could end up in bad position. Here we can expect a long positional battle. Let's come to the next game, and there we have Umidi Arya versus Tahbaz. Tahbaz is from Egypt, I believe, and a game has begun in a different opening. Again, I think Sicilian Rosalimo, so a very popular opening. Oh, it's not Rosalimo, but it is Alapin system of Sicilian, okay? A system which is comparatively rare, and now we have a different position which generally isn't played in these systems. Well, we got a doubled pawn. White has given up a bishop, and white is probably going to get the black light colored bishop for his knight. So it's going to be an interesting position. We have pieces being developed smoothly by black, and what does white have in return? Black has smooth development. Black has chances to finish the development quicker than white, but white has a pawn structural advantage. White has a better pawn structure. Black has doubled pawns, and it's not all that easy to play this position. Again, a very complex game has begun, and let's move to the next board. So we have lots of possibilities coming here, and yeah, sixth board we have a very interesting match taking place. Let's go to the main. So the game started. The game is between Hesham and Hesham Abdul Rahman versus Avinash Ramesh. Let's see how the game starts. Knight f3, knight f6, and e3, g6. It's going to be an irregular opening from white side. Black is going to play the King's Indian Benoni setup, and white wants to play a slower setup so that there is no concrete target left. So black should have no difficulty in equalizing. At the same time, black may not be able to aim for a advantage at this stage. Well, I think looks like a prepared variation, a very risky move played by Hesham, and well, seems like a well prepared system, though uncommon opening. Now it's possible to prepare the openings in depth even without any previous history, because the competitors are able to guide you to the correct moves. So it seems that it's more or less of an opening preparation over the competitor, with the competitor's help before the game, rather than going through the popular games played by the masters and something of that sort. So let's see how the games go now. We have, okay, so very few moves played by the players. Very interesting game, and black seems to be in a very comfortable position. but black has a bad piece on a6, and if white is able to exploit that, white has a bad piece on e2, the bishop should come to f3 and get exchanged with the black's bishop, and then that should be a little better for white. Then let's move to the 7th board, where we have a great Russian player who has been playing chess for tournament chess for more than 30 years, Grandmaster Igor Glick, a great theoretician, and playing against another Russian, Tatarov Vitaly. So how the players, I think Tatarov is from Ukraine probably, or Uzbek, but yes, I think let's look at the game. But both of them belong to a standard style. I don't know, the games has been, only 3 moves have been played here, something surprising. Perhaps the players arrived late, so nothing much to talk about this position. This position was popularized by Bobby Fischer once, but I think black has adequate resources to get equal position. Let's come to the next game. Grandmaster Deepan Chakravarti is playing against Gautam Krishna. Deepan Chakravarti, a dangerous attacking player. But okay, a strange move, an attempt to take the opponent out of the standard theoretical variation. This setup is uncommon and we call it Girinath setup in Indian chess. PDS Girinath, international master and one who has made 3 Grandmaster norms. He played this system with white and black, and he had good success a couple of decades back, and now we can see Deepan playing a similar system. So the position has much more latent threats than what it seems. White is going to move the queen to e1 and queen to h4 eventually to attack. Any attack against the c2 point will be guarded with the bishop on e2. Bishop would go to d1, and let's see, this is okay, this is a different opening. c3, normal move could have been knight c3 or queen e1, and that could really be a sharper position from than this, but an interesting opening again. White is trying to play in the center as well, rather than carrying out the simple attack. Okay, I think it's going to be a comparatively slower attack, white taking precautions to prevent the black's aggression. So it's not the way I had expected Deepan to play, but yes, a standard way of playing as well. At the moment I find black to be very comfortable. I would prefer to play this position with black. So let's see how the game goes. a4. Another possibility was a break on b4. a4 is fine, and d4. So we have now, okay, c4, black closes the queen side, which is contrary to the basic plan of this position. This position, black wants to open up the queen side, and perhaps this may give white some opportunity to launch a strong attack on the king side. Okay, black wants to play a completely blocked game in the center in the queen side, but on the king side only white pieces can have access. So it's difficult to justify black's play unless black has analyzed it, some specific concrete variations. Black wants to hit back in the center, but as we discussed, a standard play, and black is only trying to play on the wing where any opening would be advantageous to white. So I think white should be preferable here, unless black is playing a quick sacrifice, which I can't think of. So white has many opportunities, lot of moves to improve his pieces. The white queen could be well placed on h4 or g3. The e2 bishop could be moved to d1 and c2. The a1 rook could be brought to e1. All this improvement is possible while black is unable to improve the forces. Once white is able to play queen h4 and bishop e3, white could already be ready to attack, and you could improve. White can improve the position at least next 4, 5 or 6 moves preparing for attack. Black doesn't seem to be able to cope up. Black is not likely to be able to get equality from this position. The side where he has an advantage, queen side, is closed, and black has no plan on the queen side. On the king side, black is cramped, white has better chances on the king side, which is the only wing that is open. So we would say this position doesn't seem to be very healthy for black, but let's see, there could be some possibilities. Here we have a game between Vianney Dikunna of Goa and we have Prakhar Bajaj. Vianney was once upon a time considered to be one of the most talented players in the country, and he really played up to the mark. He was originally from Goa, Mangalore, but yes, he is an international master to my knowledge, and probably has some Grandmaster norms as well. Prakhar Bajaj probably first international exposure. Standard opening. This opening is named as Nimzo Indian defense. Let's go back a few moves. All the openings which start with d4 and with knight move, they are called Indian openings because they were played in our country about 200-300 years back when chess was being played at some places. So this was the way Indians always opened the game. So any opening starts with this first move is known as Indian system. So this was a Indian system chosen by Grandmaster Aron Nimzovich from Riga, and he played this. So this opening is known as Nimzo Indian defense. So Nimzo Indian, one of the most popular openings, and after the Queen's Gambit declined, which is the first choice for against Queen Pawn, this is the second choice for the Queen Pawn, the most solid opening and the one where black has least chances of losing. A good opening to play if you are not over ambitious. If you are very ambitious and you want to play win all the games, then perhaps other openings could be better. But a very nice opening. And here we have black gives up the center, not a very common line. So I think white has neglected the development on the king side, and black probably wants to open up the game quickly by giving up a pawn. This must be a standard variation, and rook c1. Black is thinking for this move. Let's go back to 10th game, which is International Master Ratnakaran, a strong attacking player who has played some great attacking games. He's playing against Sri Lankan De Silva. De Silva has just won the under 18 Asian Championship held at Al Ain UAE just a couple of weeks back, and now he has come here to play. He's already an international master, so surely both the players are international masters, looking for their Grandmaster norm possibilities. A Grandmaster tournament is a tournament where a player could achieve a Grandmaster norm. This is one of the important type of tournaments which enables a player to play for a norm. If one plays this in such a tournament and makes a good result, then we would have a Grandmaster norm, and 3 such norms would give a player the Grandmaster title. So this game has started with the Spanish opening or the Roy Lopez opening and the closed system played by Ratnakaran. Ratnakaran, more or less a natural player, doesn't play the theoretically well-known nines. He has his own theory and he plays according to his own theory. So let's now come to this variation. White was threatening to win a pawn by capturing the knight, and thereafter the black pawn would be weak. So black drives away the bishop and develops his own bishop. White plans to cover the central squares, and now unexpected and not very common move, pinning the knight. A dangerous position for the white bishop because it is its growth, its scope is hampered by the black pawn. So black pawn on e5, as long as the black pawn on e5 exists, the bishop on g3 will have no role to play, no role of attack or defense to play. And it is clear that white is trying to play for a d4 break, to push the d pawn to d4, thereby compelling black to capture on d4, and then the bishop on g3 would get opened up and it would have a lot of threats. So both players are preparing for improvement of pieces. Ratnakaran tries to play on the other wing as well. He keeps the queen side option of opening queen side as well as bringing the knight in the center, and knight e3 wouldn't have been adequate because of bishop into knight. So white is just waiting for knight into g3 to be played, which would be a mistake because then white would play knight into g3 and then knight would go to f5 square. So white, by creating threats on both the sides, has decided to make the game very sharp, and we can see a very interesting course of the game taking place. Let's just refresh the board and let's come to the first board. Okay, we have the position where, so interesting position, and a lot of time Kushagra has taken for this move, almost 20 minutes. So now, since it's the beginning of the middle game phase, the opening phase is over, the middle game phase is on, and as we can see, the players will play, they'll take more time in play rather than playing it quickly. They're going to plan for the final assault and then they are going to make their moves. It's going to take time. So let's have a break for some time. We'll be back in half an hour's time when the games would be in a more interesting position, and we'll have a lot of excitement at that time. So see you soon after half an hour. Welcome back to the live telecast of second international Grandmaster chess tournament at Indore. It's the third round that we have today. Indore, the cleanest city in India for last 6 years, has been conducting chess tournaments, and we had the first edition in 2022, and then last year they didn't have an international tournament, but a national tournament, national under 9, was conducted at the beautiful and clean city of Indore, where the IPS Academy got into the picture, and the IPS Academy, or Indore Public School, and its university and other academy. So a great pleasant venue to play for participants. We have 131 participants playing from 16 countries, and we have 10 grandmasters, 2 women grandmasters, 25 international masters trying to get their grandmaster norms. The top seed is the Indian player. It's an Indian player, P. Inyan from Tamil Nadu, a grandmaster, and the next two are from Russia. Savchenko is the second seed, Boris Savchenko. So very interesting battle is taking place here. We have countries from 16 different countries, 4 continents being represented. We have, of course, India. We have 1 player from USA, 1 player from Peru, 2 from Philippines, 1 from South Korea. We have from Belarusia or Belarus. We have 1 player from Egypt. We have quite a few players from Russia, 1 player from Belgium, quite a few players from Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Uzbekistan, and Ukraine, and Bangladesh as well. And we have a player from Zimbabwe and Zambia, 1 from Iran. So let's look at the top board game between International Master Kushagra Mohan and Grandmaster Inyan. A very interesting battle, and let's go back a couple of moves. So the game started with the Sicilian defense, Sicilian Najdorf variation. We'll quickly have a look at what we had seen before a break. So a system knight on f3, a bit irregular in the setup of pawn to h3. So white has planned something. White wanted to push g5. At this stage, white wanted to drive away the black knight from f6 so that the white knight could land at the central crucial square d5. So black stopped the advance, and now it's impossible for a white pawn to reach g5 and attack the knight. For obvious reasons, white can't play h4 because the g4 pawn is hanging. So white has to go for a different plan, which he did. That's opening of the g file immediately and planning to attack the g7 and f7 points. f7, as we know, the most sensitive point against a uncastled king, and in this particular variation, black is not likely to be able to castle on the king side, and queen side looks equally dangerous. So black king is going to remain in center. White is going to castle on the queen side, and it's going to be a sharp battle. Black plans a counterplay against the queen side. The idea is to drive away the white knight. The idea is to put the bishop on b7 and eventually attack the white king, which will be on the square c1 or b1, because white will have to castle on the queen side. He has lost the right to castle on the king side, and it's too dangerous to keep the king in the center for white, but it's quite safe for black to keep the king on e8. So g5, the sharpest possibilities, a direct attack has been intended. I think a new move, queen c7, this is not a theoretical move. So a sort of a concrete variation, knight d5 by white would be a mistake here. Knight into d5, queen into d5, bishop into g5, and queen into a8 would lose the queen. The viewer can find out themselves why knight d5, knight into d5, queen into d5, queen, bishop into g5, queen into a8 is not good. Black just played bishop b7 and knight c6, trapping the white queen. So you could see it for yourself, and then white took quite some time here and decided on the course of development. Black keeps the attack on the central pawn, planning to drive away the knight eventually. White continues the development. Both the players are happy developing their pieces. A war cannot be successfully won without bringing in all the pieces. So both are bringing in all the pieces. No pieces at headquarters, everybody will be at the battlefield. So black decides to drive away the knight. Moving the knight to any square except the central square would lead to a loss of a e4 pawn. So knight is moved to a central square. And now some fundamental requirements are there. Black bishop seems to be seemingly doing nothing, hitting at a pawn which is well guarded, and black is not likely to be safe on the king side. If he castles, the king in center could be risky because white is going to open the center with f4, and the black has no realistic counterplay because the b7 bishop is not taking part in the attack. But since the white pawn has moved from e4 to d5, black bishop could have a powerful square at f5, and that's what black does. Black, instead of developing a rook or protecting the pawn on the queen side, the b4 pawn, black intends to bring the bishop to a menacing position. So tactical possibility of rook a8. There is a threat of rook a8 now, which is not easy to defend against. Pawn into e5 would be a mistake here because black would play rook c8, and then the c2 pawn would be indefensible. So king b1, rook c8, rooks. So both the players are maintaining excellent balance of attack and defense. White wants to open up the center, and after the center gets opened up, black king could be in a difficult position unless black is able to close the e file with the help of a piece. And the only piece that could really block the e file at e5 would be a knight going to d7 and eventually coming to e5. White has safeguarded the position. White is even prepared to take the b4 pawn, although I think it's not without risk and one should avoid taking such a pawn. Standard play g6. Black offers the pawn. White doesn't take the pawn because if queen into b4, black would castle and the black's attack would be really dangerous. A pawn would open up the file for black pieces. So a move played after almost half an hour, more than half an hour. White doesn't know what to do with the g2 bishop, and bishop f1 is a possibility, but white plays bishop f3. So white wants to drive away the bishop on f5. White wants to play bishop g4 and either exchange the bishop or drive away the strong piece, the only strong piece in black, only strong minor piece which is influencing the safety of white's king, the bishop on f5. There is no danger to white king from knight on f6 and the bishop on e7. The queen and c7, queen on c7 and rook on c8 are dangerous. They are looking at white's weak pawn on c2, but it has been well guarded. White wants to eliminate or drive away the bishop from the f5 square. So bishop f3, a nice move. Black moves the knight. I think white should go ahead with the plan. White is still thinking perhaps an unexpected move here. Bishop g4 would lead to bishop into g5 or bishop into f5 first, and then the e file would be closed, something which white is not prepared. So white wants to start thinking afresh. A nice move for bishop f3 and not much time taken. I think only 3 or 4 minutes taken for this. So bishop f3 created some problem and knight d7 seems to have tackled those problems. A very sharp and interesting position. Let's move to the second board where Grandmaster Savchenko is playing. So interesting position. Russian Grandmaster versus Indonesian International Master. Let's look at the opening quickly. The Rosolomo attack of the Sicilian defense, bishop b5. Rosolomo, Italian Grandmaster, who was very famous for his attacking skills and the combinative vision. He believed in quick development of the king side, castle quickly, put the rook on e1 and push e5, e2, e4 to e5, open up the king while the black king was on e8. And he had many successful results with this, opening up the black king on e8, sometimes with a sacrifice. And this opening has really become popular in last 2 decades. Of course, great players have played it from both the sides, like Vishwanathan Anand has had very good result with black and equally good result with white in this opening. Michael Adams has been playing this with white pieces mainly. Kasparov, Carlsen, they all play mainly with black side. So let's see how the game goes. Exchange, and white has wasted a couple of moves by taking the bishop into knight voluntarily and also moving the pawn. But the idea is to restrict black's c8 bishop. Black c8 bishop doesn't have good squares now. So black offers a pawn which cannot be taken because queen would come to d4 and then the pawn would be recovered. So white intends to capture the pawn, black saves the pawn. Another developing move. So simple progress both the players are making. Black prefers to develop the bishop at e7 rather than g7. Normally in a fianchetto, when you have played g6, you are expected to develop the bishop to g7, but perhaps he has his own reservations. So bishop e7. I think black is waiting for white to castle on the queen side, and then black would castle on the same side to avoid a direct attack with pawn structure. So I think Russians are famous for their opening preparation, so black just wants to do away with the opening preparation and play the own game. So we can see comparatively very few moves have been played, but surprisingly it is Boris Savchenko who has taken more time. So he played a system which is entirely a white choice and still he has taken some time. So somewhere black has played a move that has confused the Russian. Let's go to the next game now, the third board game, where Grandmaster Alexei Fedorov of Russia is playing black pieces against Vietnam international master Nguyen Duc Hoa. So the game started with the King's Indian defense and eventually it changed into a Benoni opening. d4, a standard queen pawn opening, replied with knight f6. This particular setup is called Indian system because almost over 2 centuries back or even more than that, Indian players played this way, bringing out the knight first to restrict the central pawns. And these Indian setups, due to their flexibility and the opportunities that are created because of the flexibility of the position, they are very important. Indian defenses are very popular, and this King's Indian defense is one of the most popular openings, popularized by great grandmasters like Boleslavsky from USSR, Bronstein from USSR, late grandmasters, and also late grandmaster Geller from USSR. But the real changes to the system and the sort of usual play was made by Bobby Fischer, who added a new dimension to the opening. But the greatest contribution, or rather almost all the contribution to this opening, is by Garry Kasparov. And whatever King's Indian is played today, it's as per the games of Garry Kasparov, and everybody follows that. A great opening, and we'll see a very good fighting game. Black allows white to build a strong center. White goes for a simpler setup, not playing e4. So we have a standard opening. Here the normal King's Indian defense, black goes knight b d7 and e5. And when black plays e5, it's called the King's Indian defense, proper King's Indian defense. Black plays a different move, c5, thereby transposing the game into Benoni opening. Benoni opening is not as popular as King's Indian. It's not considered to be one of the best openings, but it's famous for its sharp nature, and black is able to create serious threats if white tries to gain space. So opening that has again been popularized by world champion Mikhail Tal, who is one of the greatest players of this opening, and also Bobby Fischer, Garry Kasparov and many other. Kasparov very rarely, but he has played a few games in this setup when he was a teenager. After becoming a strong player, he usually played the regular King's Indian, that's the knight coming to d7 and pawn to e5. So let's see how the game goes. White takes the space. In chess, space is important because when you have more space, you have more freedom to move the pieces and easy access to the central squares. A player who doesn't have pieces in the pawns in the center may have difficulty in developing the pieces at productive or aggressive squares, but Benoni has a different plan altogether of a change of pawn structure and eventual advance on the queen side. Black wants to play b5 and b4, drive away the knight, and then push the pawns on the queen side, ignoring the king side position. So it's white must stop this. White stops the pawn advance, and now comes knight d7. Other popular options are bishop g4 and rook e8, knight d7, bishop f4, queen c7. Queen could be placed at e7 as well. Queen on c7 gives opportunity of rook c1 followed by b4, and let us see if white takes this opportunity. h3. I don't know if this move is necessary. Rook c1 directly looked as good as probably better than this, but white has something on mind. So rook c1, yes, and now queen b8. The queen must run away from the square, otherwise white would play b4. I think white has some advantage in this setup. But queen d3 not probably an accurate move because black got a chance to exchange some pieces, and yet we have white going for a cutthroat attack against the black pieces. Black king is now could be weak, and after the pawn break e4, black will have to play very accurately to hold the king side. It's going to be white could play preparatory rook e1 as well, followed by e4. So at this stage I prefer white. Let's see how Fedorov tackles this position. On the fourth board we have international master Neela Shah and woman grandmaster PV Nandita, who has represented India in several age group tournaments as well as the chess olympiads held at Mahabalipuram 2 years back in 2022. So we have here the proper King's Indian defense here, not the Benoni King's Indian, but we have a regular King's Indian defense. And h3 variation which has been popularized by Polish Grandmaster Krasenkov. It's known as Krasenkov variation. Is gives black some trouble in developing the pieces in a normal way of the King's Indian defense, and something special has to be done. Let's see. So both the players are very imaginative and accurate, aggressive players. We are not going to see a result of a draw in this, and both of them are playing for their titles and for their norms. So smooth development, but it doesn't mean that we are going to be a slow game. Players are playing fast. Players were playing fast initially because the patterns were known to them. An interesting setup. I'm not sure if this is a very great setup. Black putting a pawn a3. In fact, I did try it several years, more than 3 decades ago. And yes, I got initiative for some time. I really made it difficult for my opponent to survive for some time. But after my opponent defended successfully, the white pieces, the knight and the bishop went back. Knight to b1, knight d2 to b1, bishop e3 to c1, and white was able to win the pawn. So I don't know what black plans here, but it's a serious possibility that white going knight d2 to b1 and bishop to c1 going to win a pawn quickly. Black must plan f5 break very soon. So black plays, okay, so queen c1, yes, intending to win the pawn smoothly, but Okay, white makes a white creates a possibility of knight into a3, but it's a vague possibility. At the moment, knight into a3 is not possible. Black would play rook into a3, queen into a3, that would be a fork, knight c2. But white probably wants to castle and then take on a3. Queen c3, okay, ambitious move, not going for a pawn. But the idea is that if the knight goes back, then white would take the pawn, okay. So black must play this move. Going the knight in a file was not possible. And pawn into pawn, interesting move. Other options were not so good. If you really wanted to save the a3 pawn for some time, you could play bishop into b5, but that could be contrary to the idea of king's Indian defense, and black would be in a bad way, giving away the d7 bishop for a knight. So pawn into pawn, knight into pawn. Black has weak pawns, the a3 particularly, but black has counter chances, and black knight could land at d4, giving away one pawn. So rook d1, knight e8. Black prepares to open up the game with f5, knight b1. So pawn is in danger or it's lost, but there is a counter play, okay, and we have black really playing for the throat, in the sense the white king. But bishop c1 would win the pawn, already attacked twice, defended only once. So bishop c1 wins the a3 pawn, it could win the d6 pawn. I don't see a very realistic concrete counter play for black. Black is probably going to play knight d4 after bishop c1, but even an exchange sacrifice on d4 with knight into knight, pawn into knight, rook into d4 could be advantageous for white, and perhaps black does have some difficulties here. Yes, we got the position I was discussing, and white is probably contemplating over the sacrifice, rook into d4, or moving the queen. I think it's a decision that needs to be taken now, because once you move the queen, you will not be able to give up the exchange. Then of course you could win the a3 pawn. So queen b4 comes into consideration, queen d3 comes into consideration, queen d2, so many moves. But if you want to give an exchange, the time is now. I don't think it's required. Something like queen d2 would be a very strong move to play. First take on a3 and then perhaps plan for taking d4 as well. I'm not very comfortable with black's position. Too many weaknesses and too less compensation, I must say. Let's see how Nandita tackles this. Let's move to the board 5. So this game began with a strange opening, which eventually transposed into something like a Rossolimo attack of Sicilian defense. It started with Alapin, Sicilian Alapin, and now we have entirely different setup with white playing e5, and because ed5 here would be non-productive. d5 is supposed to be the most active move for black, supposed to give black easy equality. e5, a risky but risky necessity. Bishop g4, bishop check, knight c6, bishop into knight check. Perhaps unnecessary capture, not really required to play that. Black voluntarily gives up a bishop. Again, not a necessary way of playing this. White has a bad piece, but black has bad pawns. So we'll see how the things go on. How is white able to successfully attack the queenside pawns? That's going to be the key factor in this game. So white gives up the b2 pawn. Taking the b2 pawn would lose queen into c6 check, because black is losing the c6 pawn. So white is not really serious about saving that pawn. Black can't take it actually, and white wants to attack. If the queens are exchanged, black is slightly better. So black knows what is being done here, and white goes back, a5. Again, various moves for white. Now c4 looks good. Exchanging the bishop followed by c4 looks good. and many other moves. So okay, white is thinking, I thought a logical course could be taken c4, but even then the problem of f5 knight cannot be solved. The f5 knight is too strong, and white doesn't have any natural sensible pawn breaks here. So black could king could be reasonably safe on e7. I think black is okay without the castling, but somehow the weakness of the king and also the problems with the dark color bishop. In fact, I don't think if the bishop exchange bishop g5 is right, bishop could just come back after c4 and the e7 bishop is stuck, it has no moves. So it would be more logical to play c4 followed by just bring back the bishop to d2 somewhere or to e3 and play a normal game where black would find it difficult to make any plan. Let's come to the next game now. Hesham Abdul Rahman is playing against Avinash Ramesh. A strange opening by white. White just wants to get rid of black's opening preparation. So white is playing a variation which couldn't have been prepared by anyone. A position, white has chosen a variation where white is not likely to get any advantage by way of opening play, and white believes in playing a roughly equal game, easy for both the players to play, and then one would see the skill. So when you have equal position and both the players are on their way, the opening preparation is, if it's finished, then they go for their own skills, and I think white is more eager to test opponent's skills rather than testing opponent's opening knowledge and preparation. Yes, one cannot always know about the preparation of the player, but one can always decide on how to play against a player seeing the past games. So black seems to have recovered the pawn. White has recovered the pawn. White's logical plan is to play knight c3 and then try to develop the quick side. But it's not going to be easy because after knight c3 you still can't play b3 because of knight e4 and probably a unclear position. White plays a very committal move, complex move of course I think, but yes, so create some serious weaknesses. White has created serious weaknesses, but black's a6 knight is at the edge and has no future. And if it goes to c7, it's going to be equally bad. So white is just comfortable driving back black's pieces. Black will have to struggle finding the squares. So perhaps b4 was a good move and white is slightly better here. But yes, immediate reaction of a opening of other side. So good move by Avinash Ramesh. I think black probably has equalized, though the problem of a6 knight remains. I think rook c8 and knight b8 could be a good course to play. Yes, rook c8 played, knight e5, knight b8, excellent, yeah, both the moves. So b5. So white has to look for some point for a rook to penetrate into black's camp. For example, if white rook has access to c7 square, white would be really in a winning position. So one plan is to move the c4 knight and then exchange the rooks in the d file and then put rook on c7. The problem is black also is able to do the same. If you lift the c4 knight, black takes your rook, and if you take with the rook, black rook comes to d2. So white does have slight edge, but probably nothing much. When you have to play moves like knight a6 to b8, going back to your original square, and knight f6 to d7 backward, particularly when knight bd7 can be played and you still have to play knight fd7, it suggests that something has gone wrong before and now a player is trying to defend rather than trying to attack. So we can conclude that this game white is maintaining a good advantage, decent advantage, and how the technical play is we'll be able to see. There we have Tetero Vitali versus Igor Glek. Igor Glek, a tournament player for more than 3 decades and one who's really played many good games, a good annotator who has commented for various chess books and magazines, and a sharp player, tries to play for a win at all costs. So let's see the opening play. So the closed setup against E6 system, first popularized by Grandmaster Chigorin and thereafter popularized by Bobby Fischer, the legendary Bobby Fischer. And among the Indians, this type of setup Nihal Sarin has played very often. Put the bishop on g2, put the pawn on d3, castle and knight on c3 or d2 and go for a slow attack. So white changes the mind. If we look at this specific position, we can go back to Morphy era, the golden era in which the same position had been reached in one of the famous games of Morphy, which Morphy won with white. So good move by black, but white gives up a pawn. So taking on d4 now becomes a interesting possibility. So knight into d4 could perhaps run into knight into d4 and bishop check, or also rook check first. So it's risky to take knight into d4, but cd4 is good. h3, bishop f3. So white has given up a pawn, but black could lose these pawns back. The d5 pawn is, for example, can be taken anytime. White can make the preliminary exchange bishop into knight and then take the pawn on d5, but then it wouldn't be a difficult position for black at all. Black would be fine. So let's see what white is doing. Okay, white goes for the straight capture of the pawn. It's completely equal position. Black has no problems. And the c2 pawn is more weak than the d4 pawn. When we think in terms of isolated pawn for the opponent, we say my opponent has a isolated pawn in the center. What compensation do you have for your isolated pawn? Black could boast of more space, open C line just by lifting the knight, and one could easily conclude that the c2 pawn is weaker than d4 pawn, which means something has gone wrong in white's strategic play. The need to keep queens even though you have you have less weaknesses. Black has 3 pawn islands, 3 weaknesses, and white has only 2. And in spite of that, white trying to maintain queens suggests that there's something which white is not able to like about the position. So knight a5 tries to drive away the queen. So an excellent pawn sacrifice. If white takes the pawn, then rook b8 and the b2 pawn would be lost. White counter attacks, black plays b4. So here we have a sharp position where knight on a5 is a very productive piece. It keeps the knight d2 stationary. Knight cannot move because of knight c4. Black also has a chance of playing bishop g5, which will sometimes compel white to play f4, because there could be a threat of the capture. And the most important, the c7 pawn is weak and is going to be attacked with the queen. So there we are after 16 moves. Black wants to play queen c7 and queen into c2, or force white to play a move like rook c1. So that is black's intention. White cannot move the c pawn because there is multiple control in the c pawn. So white, I think knight e4 looks like the only sensible move, but it seems to be difficult. I am happy with black's position rather than white. I think black is better, and well, it's quite a surprising turn of events. One player has 1 hour and 7 minutes. Tetero has 1 hour and 7 minutes left, which means that he has hardly taken any time to play this game. And on the other hand, we have a strategic master, Igor Zaitsev, who has only 11 minutes left for his 24 moves next, 24 moves. He has only 11 minutes. Now 10.58, I think a very risky play to play with such a time control. Yes, of course you are in a better position, and black has some advantage for sure. White c2 pawn is weak, but again the advantage is not tangible, and the time advantage could be decisive. Time disadvantage could prove a more dangerous factor for Igor Glek rather than Tetero's inferior position, because inferior position can be held on for some time while black needs to find out the moves, the moves which are possible in the game. So let's go to let's move to game 8. Grandmaster Dipan Chakravarti is playing. We had seen this game where white was on the verge of winning due to unscientific, some one or two unscientific moves by Gautam. And let's see, very slow opening and suddenly lot of events taking place. So let's go. E4, E5, Bishop E2. There's a Indian player, PDS Girinath. He played such a system, and he was a slow beginner. He started the game slow and he took a lot of time, and then suddenly he played for kingside attack in a very brilliant manner. So this is a Girinath variation and is not supposed to give an advantage, but yes, it takes you out of the book. You don't know what to do next because there is no precedence of any strong player playing this. So it's difficult for black to find the way. White is planning simple attack against the king. So white is going to build all the pieces and try to checkmate black. Of course, black has a perfectly fine position, and one shouldn't be really expecting much at this stage. Now white played a strange move c3, because in this setup it's more common to play knight c3, queen e1, and first queen e1 perhaps, and then knight c3. In case black puts the knight on d4, white can defend the c2 pawn with bishop d1, and soon there will be white queen coming to e1, h4, f4, f5, and the bishop c1 going and opening up against the king. So that is the way this particular setup is played. Now Dipan is the imaginative grandmaster, and of course he knows this plan, so he has something on his own. He is planning something on his own, something that has not been played very regularly. So also possible was c4 move, a very risky move, but trying to undermine the e4 pawn. Although I don't approve of that move, but it's also a possibility. So white is just trying to make some useful moves, the moves which will prove to be useful after some time. e3, perhaps another unnecessary move, and black had white had no reason to prevent the attack, because black is going to start attacking against the queenside pawns, and white should try to go and attack the king. That is how the standard procedure is, because white's a3 could lead to opening of more files. Opening of the more files on the queen side could result to black pieces entering into white's territory quicker from the A line rather than white trying to penetrate at the g7 or h7 squares, which seem to be very far, and in a way black's king is much better guarded than white's queen side pawns. So a logical part would be to support the rook and play b4. Black moved the rook, okay, and now a strange move b4 was the more logical way of playing it. If you look at a long-term plan in this position, it would be to break open the queen side by playing b4. So very interesting position, but white has been playing a bit difficult to understand moves and bit passive. Let's see how the thing proceeds. How the things proceed. So something very interesting has happened. We left at this stage before the break, and now we have white opening up the d4, the center with d4, a strange move to close. So I think a fundamentally incorrect decision. Black has activity on the queen side. Black has to play on the queen side, open up the queen side, penetrate from that side, and instead black goes a4 and c4, blocking the queen side. And what does it mean? White wants to attack on the king side and roll the pawns. And how does black counter that? Black has to open the queen side and keep the white pieces tied down on the queen side so that they don't go to the king side to checkmate. What black has done with last 2-3 moves is close the queen side, which means that the king side is the battlefield and white is placed better than black to play on the king side here. So now I think white is going to get a much better position. Black further closes the center. Now we can look at this position as a position which is dead for black for any improvement. Black has no way of improving the position. White has various ways of improving the position. Simple being h3 and then g4 and bishop coming back to e3, queen to h4. All those standard moves are going to lead to a big advantage. And let's look at the position. So we have black trying to close the center, f5, a move that intends at closing the position. Black wants to close the position completely, thereby trying to make a draw. A risky option because you're already closed where you're stronger and you're trying to block where you're weaker. So let's come to the games, and we have black trying to move the king to a safer square, but yes, white is already penetrating through black's position, and it's not likely that black will be able to close this position. White has simple plan of h4 and h5, opening up the position, and then go for king side. If black plays a sharp move, he really wants to close everything. But yes, position is closed, and it seems that black has succeeded in equalizing, but it's not so. Strategically, this position is now completely unacceptable and unplayable for black. White is just going to play knight f3 to h4, king to g2 perhaps, queen to d1, and then sacrifice on g6. White has both options, sacrificing at h5 or sacrificing at g6. Both these sacrifices are going to lead to a winning initiative for white. So black has blocked the position, pawn structure, no pawn breaks possible, but a sacrifice on g6 is a natural consequence of white's posting the pieces. Knight f3, white could go knight h4 and then queen d1 and then plan to sacrifice on h5 first, or white could go on after knight h4, put the other knight to g3 via f1, but a sacrifice at h5 or g6 is going to give white a decisive advantage. Let's move on to the next board. There we have Vianney Dikunna playing against Bajaj Prakhar, an experienced youngster from India who has done many good results, and black probably has lesser experience of this type of tournaments. Let's see how the game went. So a Nimzo Indian defense, as we were discussing the Indian system, so d4 knight f6 is the Indian system, and this particular setup, this move and the next move, they were new about 100 years back. 100 years back, Grandmaster Aaron Nimzowitsch from Riga, he found this way of playing, and it's called Nimzo Indian defense. One of the most popular openings after the Queen's Gambit declined. Let's see what are the pros and cons of this. Black wants to keep the center closed, and black prevents white from playing e4. So let's see how the plays. White wants to play e4 eventually, but at the moment it would lead to weakening of the queen side pawn. So a3, bishop into knight check, queen into bishop. So black has given up black has given up a bishop for a knight. It doesn't really matter. Black would try to keep the position closed. Standard, not a very great move perhaps. It it would have been better to try to play with d6 and e5 structures, because now the black squares could be very weak. Pawn into pawn. A committal move giving away central square, a central pawn. So white has better center now, and black c7 pawn is weak. Not a very interesting position from black's point of view, in the sense not many plans. To have an interesting position, you need some threats and activity of the pieces. Black's b7 is active, but knight b8 has problems, c7 pawn is weak, and black will find it extremely difficult to create any genuine counterplay. Black gives up a pawn for counterplay. Don't know if should be considered a good move. It doesn't look like one. White wants to exchange queens, attack the bishop as well. So black guards the bishop. You can see you're given up a pawn, and now you're playing a defensive move guarding the bishop when you have no plan. I think a move like b4 would give white a good advantage. White just exchange the queens first, and then perhaps to win. There seems to be some we'll have to get it corrected, because after queen into queen, rook into queen must have been played. The score is wrong. We'll have to get it rectified. Okay, so this position is, I think, incorrect. Some mistake has taken place, and we can see that black is simply a rook down. Obviously something wrong with the, the games are being played very badly. So surely this is not the move. So we have to skip this and get this board corrected. We'll go to the next board. Sometimes when a player adjusts a chess piece, a move is captured by the DG board, and here we have a position which doesn't make sense in a couple of moves. So we are not going to see this game. We'll go to move to the next game. We have board 10, where international master Ratnakaran is playing against international master. Ratnakaran is from Kerala, from Calicut, which was once the chess capital, and we have international master De Silva. The game has ended with a forfeit. Okay, we seem to have some problem with the last two boards, something really wrong with the system. We go back to the earlier games. We'll try to see the games on top 8 squares. Let's try to go back to where we had left. The first board, Kushagramon versus Inyan, and that's really progressed very fast. A nice move by Inyan. I think it looked, at least it seems that white has a strong position here. White wants to go bishop g4, after which black pieces will be driven back. Then white opens up the center with f into e5, and black eventually gets into a bad position. Even the b4 pawn would be hanging, but black plays this knight retreat, wants to take bishop into g5, thereby reducing the chances of opening of the e file. So that when the opening of e file is not there, when the black pawn on e5 is maintained, white has played f4 to eliminate the e5 pawn. But if white has to recapture the bishop with f into g5, after black captures bishop into g5, if white has to capture f into g5, then surely black's pawn center becomes strong. So the purpose of this move is to discourage bishop g4, bishop into g4, and here pawn into g4 followed by rook h1 was a possibility. Within the e3 bishop probably wouldn't have a rook into g4, bishop into g5. Okay, white seems to be doing fine. White has sacrificed the pawn, but it's a risky game. And f5, white wants to open up. Yes, a nice attack for white for the pawn, and white could get back the pawn. White is trying to get back. Black has to save the pawn. Yes, we now have a position where one side has given up a pawn. White has given up a pawn for attack, and at this stage white seems to be doing better than black. Black king is stuck and the position is not closed. Black wanted to close the position, but black has not succeeded in closing the position. The only relief is that there is no direct combination, and white queen will be tied down to the defense of c2 point. So there is some relief that white queen and king rook are not ready to join immediately. Yet after white plays rook f1, there could be a threat of rook into g6. It's not going to be easy to defend this position. So we could have a good result for Kushagra in this. But of course, Inyan is a seasoned player, though he is almost of the same age. Most of the players at the top board, both the players are juniors, and they have a capacity of playing the best games. Let's come to the second board, where the game had begun in a standard fashion, but okay, and here, yes, this is a move for which queen d2 and a move knight c3, obvious move for which 5 minutes were taken, and also obvious move for which 15 minutes were taken. I think the move bishop e7 has really confused, because you normally play g6 to fianchetto the bishop, that's to put the bishop on g7, and here we have a original player who wants to put it on the e7 square. So this move must have confused Boris, because he takes 15 minutes to bring the knight, a very obvious move. The queen on d2 is awkward actually. White would like to play knight on d2 and f4, but one doesn't know where to move the knight now. Perhaps to h2, knight to h2 and f4 is a good plan. So knight h5, bishop h6, okay. So that's the idea. Bishop almost played in instantly less than 2 minutes. A good plan was to play knight h2 followed by f4, but okay, bishop h6, a nice plan. And now, well, I think black has taken 27 minutes for this move, knight h5, and another 20 minutes after this bishop h6. So if the clock is correct, then I think it's Savchenko who has a big advantage now, 41 minutes and only 13 minutes for Dilshan, the Indonesian Grandmaster, Indonesian International Master. So let's see, perhaps something wrong with the clock. If the things are right, then white has a huge advantage, both psychologically as well as in practical play. Objectively, white may not be better, or white could be very slightly better. Third game between Nguyen of Vietnam and Federer of Russia. Let's go back to the stage where we had left. We had begun the game started with a normal King's Indian defense, but then by playing c5, black goes for a Benoni setup. We discussed the Benoni setup before the break, and we have a position which white is certainly preferable because of black's awkward piece position. Queen on c7 is awkward, white wants to play b4, so queen d3 is not a best square for the queen. I think knight d2 would have been more logical, knight h5, bishop d2, knight. Black has exchanged one piece, so thereby reducing the space disadvantage, but doesn't mean that black has solved the problems. White's exchanging the f3 knight enables white to play f4 and e4 quickly. When you play opening like Benoni, you are giving a stronger center to your opponent. You have queenside majority, your opponent has majority in the center. When your opponent has majority in the center, now you already considered one advantage. What is a compensation? It may not be easy for your opponent to advance the center pawns, whereas it's much easier to advance the pawns on the queen side. If black gets b7, b5 without losing a pawn, black generally gets an advantage. At the same time, if white gets e4 and e5 without losing a pawn, or sometimes with a pawn sacrifice, white gets a dangerous kingside attack. So next few moves will be aimed at white advancing the kingside pawns and black trying to prevent them advance further, as well as trying to expand on the queen side with b5. f4, a logical move, check, king moves. So white is going to drive away the bishop with e3 and then play e4. Black stops it. So again e3 followed by e4 looks like a logical course. Bishop f3. Okay, sending back the knight is always good. Knight cannot go back to f6 because of e3, and the d4 bishop is in trouble. So knight to g7, e3, bishop goes back, g4. A modern way of looking at it, rather than e4, it's a good idea to concentrate attacking particular square f5. In direct f5, in direct e4, perhaps the black gets a chance to bring a knight or bishop at f5 after the preliminary exchanges. So white wants to play g4, and then probably e4 could be the next move, compelling black to exchange either on g4 or on e4, which could be very dangerous. White seems to be doing very well here. So black goes but makes a desperate move, giving up a pawn, hoping to win the b2 pawn, although it's quite interesting to take pawn into pawn and queen into b5. But okay, white plays g5, trying to close the center. Okay, so players have decided to make it more or less like a street fight rather than a regular battle. White has a very powerful option here, I think knight a2 and knight b4, which seems very good. Knight a2, knight b4, knight c6. I think black has to make some difficult choices here. Knight a2 looks really strong. Knight could go to b4 and perhaps to c6, and black queen side would be destroyed. b3, knight a2 also plans for b3 break, after which black is this. I think black is in a bad way. Look, even a strange move. Okay, more of prophylaxis rather than direct action. Bishop d7, and yes, even now a right time to play knight a2, but at the cost of a a4 pawn. White is only 5 minutes. Okay, so where did white take all this time? Okay, white has a very powerful position. White took some time for g4. Okay, 7 minutes. White is doing well. White didn't take the pawn, made the choice g5 very quick, c4, queen c2, all quick, and now 10 minutes for this move, which means that white is not satisfied with the activity that comes with knight a2, and a passive move has been played after 10 minutes of thought, and 28 minutes now after this move. So okay, something wrong with the clock, or player is really confused what to do. But I think white is still in a very good position, has nothing to worry, and it's, I think, black who should be very careful of what to play. I think we're going to see only up to the game 8. Nilash versus Nandita. Yes, it has taken a very interesting shape. We discussed this position where the a3 pawn was weak, and yes, we discussed this position, knight d4, and we're discussing if whether to move the queen to b4, which looked like a very solid option, or to sacrifice on d4, which didn't really make sense at this stage. So queen b4. So one pawn has been lost by black. Black is strengthening the other pawns. White moves bishop b2, offering the pawn on a2, which has not been taken. Knight rook into a2 could lead to tapping out the rook with bishop a3, but it's not easy to attack the rook. So it was a possibility, I thought, rook into a2, queen c5, okay, driving away. And now white has a extra pawn, and black doesn't seem to have any reasonable counterplay. Queen d2 looks like a strong move. Yes, queen d2 played. Knight e6, and b4 can be played, and it can also be avoided, for the simple reason that b4 would make the c4 point weak. It would be prudent to play something like a4, or to start with, yes, because black also wants to break b5 sometimes. So perhaps it's possible to play a4, for which black is planning to play knight g5. So black will try to create some play, but after a4, knight g5, white may take on d4 as well, the pawn. So it seems that white should do better if white plays the safeguarding a4 first, and then that would activate white's pieces. Black would in that case try to put a knight on c5. If white played a4, then knight on c5 would be a indirect outpost, and both the players are matured positionally and tactically. We can see a very interesting battle, although black has lost a pawn. White also has the option of bishop g4, and I'm not very comfortable about black's position, but one thing is certain, that is going to be a sharper game and not a boring game. Rook c1. Okay, white wants to play for the idea, with the idea of b4 and not any other idea. So white wants to play b4, bishop e2, bishop d3 perhaps, but white is at the moment giving up the idea of trying to win the d4 pawn, which was, I think, a more natural way of playing. And here I thought bishop g4 would attack the d4 pawn and win it, but he was afraid of b5 perhaps. So a4 first, threatening bishop g4, looked like a very good continuation. So okay, a game which is somewhat a strange game compared to other games, where it is played more or less like a game from the golden times, or where the strategy was not developed. White playing bishop into c6 check voluntarily and not following up with queen a4 is a bit strange, because one could say that the idea was to play queen a4, sending the bishop back, but it doesn't seem to be the idea. White plays d3, black gives up the bishop voluntarily, brings the knight out. Now white takes the queen to a4 perhaps with a different route. Okay, white doesn't want to play rook, so nothing much. Now white plays queen a4. So somewhere white has made some weird moves, but black also faces serious problems with the king on center. Black's only plan is to play queen d7 and then g5 and g4. A risky plan, but that has to be played. Queen b6, again a strange square for the queen, because the b line is open and rook could be very comfortable on b8 attacking the b2 point. When you don't have a white colored bishop, yes, it would be better to keep the pawns on white squares. Okay, queen b6 is active. I thought queen d7 followed by rook b8 was one plan, but the main plan could be g5 and g4. Bishop g5, the idea of exchanging the bishops, but queen b5 comes at the stroke, queen c2, a5. So I think after c4 followed by bishop d2, white could be better. b3, again a non-committal move, doesn't know whether to play a4 or c4, just wants to wait. Queen d2, again a non-committal move. Black should start counterplay with a4 perhaps. Bishop into bishop, knight into bishop, rook h8, g3, and king f8. Black knight on f5 is very strong, it's not easy to move the knight. h3, so white takes the steps to go for g4 break. g4 break will be effective, only problem is black knight would be on h4, creating some threats. So okay, white is not going to play g4 because it allows a check on h4, or maybe rook h1 followed by g4. Okay, complex position, nothing much happening, but black has useful break a4, which black seems to be reluctant in playing, and c4 is a break which would not come. So a4 looks like a very natural movement which is being avoided for quite some time for the reasons known only to the players. So let's wait and watch how the players play here. Hesham and Avinash, let's see, there's a problem with the queen side pieces. Knight on a6 was bad, we saw this position, queen exchange, and white has some problem, black has some problems because of the queen side, white's menacing queen side pawns. White just strengthens the position. White knows that black cannot play knight d7 because of knight c6. Black is waiting for white doing something, but white is eventually going to break a5 and create queen side pawn once the pieces are well protected, and black has no moves left. On b8 knight is stuck, so Black wants to create some counterplay with bishop b3, attacking the pawn and attacking the rook. Fundamentally an inferior position for black, but perhaps tactically a tenable position, because bishop b3 could, it's not easy to mate if you want to really guard. So okay, we have next game now. So both the players of Soviet school, positional background, but Glek being more aggressive has played a sharp system. Rook a7, a strange move to understand, because queen c7 could be coming very soon. Bishop e4 guards has guarded. So h4. So both the players, it's going to be a strategic battle, and Glek took a lot of time in the opening, left with very little time. Here almost 20 moves, 20 minutes at this 7-8 minutes per move. It's taking 2 minutes, 3 minutes for decision making moves. And though white has a positional advantage due to black's space advantage, it's not easy for white to win the d4 pawn as well. c2 pawn could be weaker than the d4 pawn, but with bishop on e4, bishop g7 looked like a very logical way, some time to prepare for f5 in case we are attacking the c2 pawn. Rook e8, standard move, h4, rook e5. So okay, a move deliberately taking a tempo with knight f3, which means it's going to take on c2. So knight f3, rook c5, knight into d4, bishop into d4, queen into d4. The c2 pawns gets protected. So what does he want for knight f3 and knight into d4? Knight f3, perhaps knight f3 moves the rook, and if you take the pawn, the knight would come to c4, and the b2 gets into trouble. Okay, so the pawn cannot be taken, so queen f3. It was nice variation, knight f3, rook e7, knight into d4, knight c4. Knight f3, rook moves, yeah. Knight into d4, knight c4, the b2 pawn is weak. The d4 knight is weak as well. So not easy. Even rook d7 was a possibility there. So white doesn't take the pawn. Yeah, this position with material balance, but opposite colored bishops. So both the players are going to play, trying to make use of the bishops well. White's logical plan could be bishop d3 and b3 and knight c4, and after the knights are exchanged, to attack f7. Black is going to find it difficult to attack f2 because of the liability d4 pawn. White bishop will be much more active. Already it's a little more active, but white's bishop will be much more active than black's bishop, which is the scope of which is limited because of the d4 pawn. So here we have a position where white is preferable, easier to move, no weaknesses, and black has several weaknesses. Although a7 is a weakness, it can't be attacked easily. The b4 and d4, particularly b4, could be attacked quite easily. Not the best optimal activity possibilities for black compared to white. White has a more active position. Let's come to the 8th board, where we're discussing a piece sacrifice on h5, and it has actually occurred. As we see, white played knight h4, and white has not even waited to prepare with queen d1. White just plays direct bishop into h5 here. His pawn into bishop, queen d1 and queen h5. Just a simple attack like the I think the games in the 19th century and perhaps also in the 20th century surely, but in 19th century itself players were able to make such sacrifice. I can recollect a few games from 18th century as well, a standard sacrifice, and black is in a losing position. Either capture is good. there doesn't seem to be any realistic compensation. And of course, knight into g6 probably looks the strongest. See, black is in a bad way. So Gautam Krishna, perhaps a difficult opponent in Dipan Chakravarti. For him, Grandmaster Dipan Chakravarti is a very strong attacking player. Let's see how he conducts the game hereafter. Ninth board, I hope they have not corrected this board. Let's skip it. And 10 board, okay, 10 board we got some position. There's no moves entered earlier, but now we got a game. So let us have a look at this game. In fact, we were able to see the initial moves and then we didn't have the chance. So a royal Lepers position where bishop g5, a strange move. Bishop on g3 is a little strangely placed piece because it has no activity. It's hitting a pawn on e5. At the same time, if white gets d4 and if black is compelled to take on d4 with the pawn, then white would have a strong center and the g3 bishop could get activated. So black develops. Bishop b6 was a good precautionary move. Queen e7, knight f1, knight h5. e4, knight f4. So white has got a strong center, but when white plays d4, the e4 pawn could become weak. Here it's directly capturable, so white will have to wait for the d4 advance. Knight fd2, supporting the e4 pawn, planning to play d4. The f1 knight has no direct square, so white is probably going to play g3 after d4, g3, h5, d4, queen e2. Okay, g3, queen e2 is a good tempo attacking the pawn. b4, black is required to make more weakness. White wants to go queen b5, winning a piece, at least putting a lot of pressure, not winning a piece directly, but king f8 gets out of the pin. Queen a6, yes, king g7. Queen a6 was a threat, not queen g5. Here there is a threat of queen a6. So for which black would have to castle, and one doesn't know. Okay, black doesn't want to castle. King f8, h4. G3 looks more natural than this. Okay, so trying to close the king side. A tactical possibility, knight into d4. Queen into f4 was not played because of the possibility. It's knight into d4. Surely queen f6 doesn't make much sense, and if we played queen f6, then gf4 may not be really strong, but white gets a knight on g3 or e3 and black gives up a knight. Let's see what is the idea of the piece sacrifice. To create a weak pawn structure and prevent development. Knight g3 followed by short castle would lead to very weak pawns. Knight g3, queen into f4, short castle, queen into g3, check the knight. So De Silva has sacrificed a piece. And queen a1 check, not queen into f4. Queen into f4 look logical as well. Queen a1 check, queen d1, queen a6, preventing castling. Okay, so this move suggests a draw because if white plays queen a2, black must play queen a1 check. So I think it's a suggestion of a draw, or queen e2, queen a1 check, queen d1, and perhaps queen c3 is also possible. But I think the piece sacrifice has been made in order to get a complex position with counter chances and perhaps a repetition of moves. But somehow I feel that white would try to play for a win. Although looking at Ratnakaran's attacking style, this is the type of position he would never want to play. And a player like Ratnakaran would probably think of knight into h5 and queen into g4 as one of the alternatives. Though it's not working here, he would reject it, but yes, a sharp position. Ratnakaran plays very quickly compared to other players. So De Silva sacrificed the piece. De Silva is left with only 6 minutes. Ratnakaran has 51 minutes. Oh, it's 51 and 2. Okay, so now that's quite good. White doesn't want to make a draw. White goes knight e2, very good. Black plays queen d3, queen b3, threatening queen exchange. Queen goes back, castling has been prevented, king f1. And yet, how to bring the h1 rook into play? If white gets the h1 rook into play, white would win. So now queen c4, and now knight e4 should give good advantage to white. Knight e4 followed by king g2, almost winning advantage. So Ratnakaran could have a full point soon after knight e4. That doesn't seem to be a realistic counterplay after knight e4. And I can't see a threat. And white is ready for other knight to g3. Black is in serious trouble here. So that is where we stand at the end of about 2.5 hours of play. And let's have a break in this live commentary of third round of the second Indore International Grandmaster Chess Tournament being held at the IPS Academy Indore. And this tournament has a participation of 131 players from 16 countries, which include India and USA and Russia, Ukraine, Uzbek, Iran, even Peru, and 4 continents are being covered. A lot of African players too, Egypt, and also from Iran, various places. South Korea, who basically started playing active chess only during the Asiad, have sent players here. So there will be a break of half an hour, and we'll see what happens in the games. The games are in very complex situations, and we could have some games with a direct result in about half an hour. I'll try to make it a 20 minutes break, and we'll try to join you after 20 minutes, but let's have it a half an hour break, and we'll have most of the games result. Today's 2 rounds, so players are tired and you could see any mistakes, but as the things stand, let's look at the interesting part of the game. That though the players are tired, not many are playing for a draw, and everybody is trying to win. It's too early in the tournament to play for a draw, so they want to win and try for the championship. Let's have the best side of the games for the day now. This is the phase where the players will be at their best. Thank you. I'll see you after half an hour. See you soon. The games, you can watch the games without the commentary. Games are being played, and commentary will resume after half an hour. Welcome back to the live telecast of the third round of second Indore International Grandmaster Chess Tournament being played at IPS Academy here in Indore. As we see, a lot of fighting games today, and we have a interesting simplified position on the top board between International Master Kushagra Mohan from Bangalore and Grandmaster P. Inyan from Tamil Nadu. A very interesting position indeed, and the position has simplified, but it still remains a very complex position. So let's see how the game has progressed since we left it last. We left at this stage, and White had played Queen f2. There were dangerous threats such as Rook f1 followed by Rook into g6. The other option was to play Bishop b6 and Bishop into a5. And let's see what course of action Inyan had taken. At this stage, I think that White is in a better position, preferable position, not objectively necessarily, but because of the simplicity of plan. White has a chance of sacrificing g6 and starting an attack. White has a chance of playing Bishop b6 and winning the pawns. Black saves one pawn. Black gives up the b4 pawn. So the material advantage is immediately gone. At the same time, there is some counterplay. The d5 pawn is going to be won again. So Bishop d2. a3 was also a more concrete possibility, and Queen d2 was not possible here because of Rook into e3, but a3 would have prepared for Bishop g5 and Queen d2 and Bishop g5 and such moves with the idea of taking on a4. So Queen f5. This is what White was aiming at, attacking two rooks at a time, and thereby forcing an exchange of queens. I don't know if it's a right decision, because in this position where the black king is weak, it would have been more natural to play the middle game, and taking on a4 could have been a good option. a3 would have been actually better instead of Bishop e3, but yes, Queen e6, White wants to exchange queens. So, okay, White has almost no risk of losing because the bishop will be very effective in this, but Black could have still very dangerous center pawns, and we still have a complex game because White has a chance of attacking Black's pawns, but Black's pawns could become very strong. They are more advanced than White's pawns. White has connected passed pawn, Black has only one passed pawn. So objectively, it's good for White. If the rooks are exchanged, White could just advance the queenside pawns and probably win the game. But reduced material and reduced number of pawns always create chances. As long as the rooks are on the board, Black could get initiative, trying to get a knight at d5 or at f5 and d4. There are going to be various possibilities. Black first safeguards the king from a 7th rank penetration. I think Black has nothing to fear in this position. White has a fine position, okay, but that's it. There's nothing more than that. Perhaps a move Rook a6 can be. Let us see what happens in Rook a6. There's on King e7 and King d7. So King d7, there will be Bishop b4, Rook c6. That looks like the only way for Black. The other option, Rook a6, King e7, would lead to disaster after Bishop b4 and Rook d1. So clearly Black has worked out a plan. Bishop b4, King d7, and if Rook a6, then Rook c6, and Rook a7 check and Rook c7, and Black is hoping to hold that ending, which is possible because Bishop on b4 comes in between. Black king is far away from White pawns, and the Black king is near the White passed pawns, then it would be possible to make a draw. But surely Inyan is struggling for a draw, and let's see how Kushagra is able to improve. Let's come back to game 2. Third round, so it's not initially in a Swiss League tournament we have the stronger players playing against comparatively weaker players. Although every player in this tournament is strong, one must know that it's such a strong tournament that only the players rated above 2000 on the international ELO rating list are allowed to play in this. So you're not going to find a inferior player here, but the players with equal strength have started playing with each other now, whereas it had been almost a difference of 300 or 400 rating points earlier. So we are going to see tougher matches, and as we see on the second board, Savchenko has won a pawn. So let us see from how did he win the pawn. This was a stage where we left, and it looked very awkward why black actually chose to put the bishop on e7 and bishop h6. Black opens up a very risky move for sure. Black wants open diagonals for the bishops, but the position could really become weak. The e3, the e5 is a target, and it's not easy to guard this. And he's given up the pawn. Okay, the standard move bishop d6. Bishop d6 would create some tactical threats with moves like knight f4. So I think he didn't want to get into the battery. White wants to play knight f4, and after the knights are exchanged, the e into f4 would always land into queen into e6. So he gives up a pawn. White takes the pawn. Queen runs away. So black has lost a pawn. What concrete compensation does black have? Not really. Seems to be a good position for Sanjay. And 0.00, something wrong with the clock. 0.00, but no result has been displayed yet. So okay, we just got a next board. Let's go back to board 2. So it's live, but something strange. 0.00, and after 24 moves, one move for queen d7, and then we have 0.00. Impossible that 24 minutes would have been taken at this stage. So something wrong. Let's wait for the actual position to come, the clock position. Let's go to the third board now. We saw this was a Benoni opening with a dangerous option. White had a very dangerous possibilities with knight a2 and knight b4, even a move b4. When we left at this stage, it's even before going bishop d8, but knight a2 was a very strong possibility. A move before, or even now, and trying to put a knight to b4 and c6, blocking black's pawns. But white instead decides to allow black to roll the pawns, something which I find it difficult to understand, because now black is comfortable rolling the pawns. And white pawn is being attacked and having lost the control of e4 point. But white wants to play with e4, and if he gets a knight at e4, then a knight would land at f6 eventually. Generally, e4 would allow black to play bishop d4, so not a great opening, not a great strategic plan. Knight on g7 is a bad piece, so based on that we could make a plan. One plan was to deflect the queen with b4 and take on e3, where the battle would be decided by the weak white king and the f4 pawn rather than the strategic concepts like bad knight on g7. But yes, b4 has been played, okay, and bishop into e3, bishop into e3, rook into e3. So f3 bishop is attacked, which moves to g2. Black is probably going to double here. Yes, black all ready to attack. Rook into e3, queen into e3, f4 pawn is attacked. Rook into c4. So white has guarded all the weaknesses at the moment, and white has won a pawn. Black needs to have some concrete plan. Black has less time as well. So perhaps b4 was hasty, and he had a lot of time when he played b4. 28 minutes and 27 minutes were 7 minutes were given for this move, and probably he felt that his attack was very strong. But after bishop g2, suddenly black took 9 minutes for this obvious move, and queen into e3 was played instantly. Rook into c4. And can't believe that 40 moves are being taken after this move. 40 minutes. So white seems to have overcome all the problems. The black bishop has no square, black knight has no square, and the rook in open file has no useful square at the moment. The d6 pawn is directly under attack, and there is no way of checkmating. I think queen f2 followed by rook e1 looks like a possibility. That could be his plan. Queen f2 looks logical, wanting to put the rook on e1 and perhaps then a check on g1. So I think we have lost the track of the clock here. Let's move to the board 4. Nila and Nandita, that was a very interesting game. Black had given up a pawn for concrete play, which wasn't very actively there, but okay, white is creating some weaknesses and black would have some play. So counterplay has begun, a cause of move b4. It would have been prudent to play with a4 and then attack the d4 point. It would have been a slower course completely. Now one has to deal with the tactical possibilities which take place here. f3, yes, excellent move. It seems that the black's initiative is going to decide the game and not white's material advantage. Let's look at this. Bishop into knight check, practically forced. Bishop into bishop. g2 is attacked, so pawn into f3. Knight into f3 is possible, yes. Knight into f3, pawn into c4, then knight into c4. A very sharp position. Pawn into c4. Rook into c4, exchange sacrifice. G into f3 was a possibility. After knight into f3, pawn into c4 has to be met with rook into c4. So well planned exchange sacrifice. 2 pawns for exchange, and the d4 goes, the third pawn. Black would probably take on c4 and then threaten to take on e4 by moving the king. Yeah, so e4 is attacked, so queen must retreat. Black has given that pawn. Okay, so white has given the pawn. So after queen e4, well, a nice combination is possible. Queen e4, rook e1, no, rook e1, then we have queen f5. Perhaps queen e4, then take on d4, but yeah, it's a sharp position. I think black has queen e4, queen c7 check, a check, knight g5. Okay, that's I missed this tactic. If rook f7, queen into rook check, and if king goes back, anyway knight g5. So this is a tactic which could be dangerous. King g8. And now, well, let's see what white has missed. And excellent combination for Nandita. I think she took here queen into e4 and queen c7 check. And well, can the viewers find out why isn't white winning immediately with knight g5, which attacks both the queen as well as threatens mate? At this stage, I think Nilesh has realized that now for the first time in the game, he's at a serious risk of losing the game. Knight g5 could be met with a strange move, rook e7. And if queen into rook, then there would be bishop h2 check and queen into e7. And knight e5, rook e7, queen c4 check would be met with d5. So very confusing position is coming. The endgame after knight g5, rook e7, knight into e4, rook c7 seems very dangerous for white again, because the d pawn is going to march and the black rook is going to arrive at c2. So suddenly black's excellent tactic has created dangerous threats. Rook into f3 is a threat for black. Rook into f3 followed by queen f4 or queen f3. Black is going to launch her own attack, and the bishop on e5 is strong. If knight into e5 is played, then the pawn takes that, and there is no justification to the loss of an exchange. So game which was not played after getting an advantage, a player should try to win a game in a strategic manner, reducing the activity of opponents, trying to make tactics as a least possibility. But what has happened here is white wants to continue the game in the same tactical way. White wants to, after b5, probably black already got a lot of initiative, and white somewhere lost the way, and white was just hoping to take black in a trap with knight g5, which doesn't seem to work because of rook e7. So we could see a result where black could get a few full point here, which couldn't have been said, say, 10 moves before. So that is the secret of King's Indian defense, that the positions are very sharp, and one who plays aggressively gets better chances of winning. Here it was a interesting game. We left at this stage, queen f4 and king g2 was played, and rook h6, rook h1, and it seemed that white is now going to play g4. g4 was indeed played. Rook h4, an interesting move. How fruitful is this? I don't know. White played simply f3, or takes first and then plays f3. Black has no real plan. Also, it's possible for white to take on h4 and exchange the rooks, other pair of rooks as well, with rook h1. Then the knight on f5 would have to move to h6 after the preliminary rook exchange. So at the moment, black's pieces seem to be in a very complex position, and anytime f6 break could be very dangerous. But yes, here the various moves, I think bringing back knight to f3 or rook into h4 both seem to be good. Okay, knight f3, simple. And g5. Okay. Yeah, sometimes it's necessary to complicate. Black knows that black cannot exchange both the pieces here, then the position would be bad. So knight f3, black gives up a pawn, knight into g5, and now black exchanges. Black gives a check. So for king g3, black wants to play knight g6, and queen moves to e3, then d4, queen moves to d2. I don't see, yeah, but the h1 rook is attacked, so king g3, knight g6. If you exchange queen f6 check, it's just not so good. King g1 would run into queen into g5. So perhaps a hasty move, moving the knight from g5. White had some edge, but here we don't know. Black wants to play knight g6, which will attack both the rook on h1 and the queen on f4, which means that white must exchange queens on f6, giving back the extra pawn, then exchanging the rooks, and the ensuing endgame is not really inferior for black. Black has strong center pawns, and black would be no longer a pawn down. So knight g6, the game must have taken place. It's only 29 moves, but we can see 0.00. So when it shows 0.00, it actually means that somebody has lost on time. But since the result hasn't appeared on the board, it seems that something wrong with the DG boards here. White has sacrificed a piece, but seems to be completely winning here. A7 as a threat. Hesham versus, yeah, I don't think the result has taken place, but after bishop into bishop, pawn into bishop, white just gets a7 and a8. Black is losing. So here, let's go to the next board. As we were discussing this, that black is unable to create any threats, which is contrary to Gleiko's style, and white is, we were looking at a strategic plan. Since both the players are from also while Soviet Union, we could expect a strategic play, which we had felt that white would play bishop d3, b3, knight c4, put a bishop on c4, and then try to attack f7. Exactly that has happened after the, so queen f3, and then bishop d3, and then queen f4, b3, queen f4 was probably not necessary, knight c4, and knights are exchanged, and queen comes back. So it's not easy to attack f7, and it would have been better to put queen somewhere else, but it has no good square. The only way one could attack f7 was rook d3 and rook f3, which means that white will have no such threats. So white probably wants to play bishop d3 first. Still, as long as black covers the e file, black has no danger. So black is playing queen c5, that means black is playing more ambitiously. And for rook e1, probably black would play something like queen e5. If the rooks are exchanged, it would be a draw. So no improvement for either side. Bishop c4 is fine, but then rook f5 or rook e7. White should play bishop c4 anyway here. And if rook f5, then queen e4. But nothing much is happening. We can expect a draw again 0.00. So we don't know. We'll move to the next board. Dipan Chakravarti. I think Dipan was completely winning when we saw the sacrifice. Bishop into h5. Queen d2, queen e2 as we expected. Rook g1. So black is not going to escape with just one pawn. There is something worse that's going to happen. Black is not going to get out of a bind, and it's the chance that black could actually lose more than a piece. The pinned piece is gone, but apart from the pinned piece, the white pawn surviving on e7 will be deadly. Black is in a resignable position here, pawn into pawn, and well, I think black could resign here. Black has a bad position. Board 9, Vianney was a pawn up, and oh, they have corrected it now. We had an illegal move, rook e8 being played, but now white is just one pawn up as we felt. Black is going to play. White is going to play e3 and then develop the pieces. Okay, g3 fine. Knight e4, rook takes, and bishop comes back. But g3 is a bit slow, and black may get some initiative with rook c3. So bishop g2. So I think somewhere misplayed by white, the pawn has gone back, and white can no longer boast of any advantage. Rook a2 would be an awkward move to meet to bishop d4. Rook a2 was really most principled move here, or even bishop a6, because it's not easy to guard the e2 pawn. Somehow h6 encourages driving of the knight. I think the position has changed its nature completely. Black is not at all in a worse position, and white's retreat suggests that white is now struggling for a draw, which shouldn't be very difficult. So I think somewhere strategically improper game. White is no longer interested in trying to win by saving the bishop. So drawn ending, and we can expect a draw in this game soon. Let's see if the board 10 a piece sacrificed by De Silva. Let us see if Ratnakaran has outplayed him. It looked that Ratnakaran was completely winning. Here we are discussing a move knight e4, which was not played. Queen d3 as effort move was played. I don't see any reason, but yeah. And now knight g3, queen b4, king g2. So white is winning pawns after pawns. Okay. So encouraging a sacrifice knight into rook into f2 is not working, because black just takes. Queen runs away, one pawn is gone, and knight comes back. I think it's black is going to get mated shortly. A tactical move which makes not realistic stance, but it avoids immediate defeat. The queen was going to h6. I think queen e2 looks like decisive. Queen e2 and the g4 pawn would be lost. Black would be checkmated soon. And black is short of time. White has a lot of time left. And after queen e2, followed by eventual queen into g4, is going to be quite a one-sided position. Let's go back to game 1, board 1. Kushagra Mohan Inyan. Yes, I think white was slightly better, but as we had predicted that black was hoping for a draw, and it has actually happened. White has gone for this draw. So rook c7 was a interesting move because there is no forced draw, but black wants to tempt white into a draw. I think moves like rook g1 could be very awkward to meet. Black has some problems after rook g1 in my opinion. But the move chosen, I think, simplified the things. Yeah, we expected this to happen, and though white has no need to agree to a draw, but white decided to play it safe. So we have a top board result which has led to a draw. On the second board, black is trying to create a fortress, which is the best chance. Black is attacking a pawn, and after queen into queen, white must take queen into queen here, otherwise white loses back the pawn. a2 pawn is under attack, and although a2 pawn it cannot be taken directly because of queen into f5 check and queen into bishop, but g2 pawn has to be guarded. So one can see the two possibilities: g3, which unnecessarily allows bishop f3. Other one is to take queen into queen first and then guard the pawn with rook g1. So position where black has not equalized. Black is a pawn down, but presence of opposite cut bishops could make it possible for black to make a draw. Now not with correct play, because black has too many weaknesses as well. But the g2, if white is able to maintain f3 and then get g4, black would be lost. So white's plan would be to guard g2 well and then play f3 and g4, which will lead to winning position. I see that happen in queen into queen, pawn into queen, rook g1, followed by f3 and g4. So white should be much better. Let's come to the next game. Yeah, which was at 0.00 again, but some moves have been played. Queen f2, yes, planning rook e1, queen into d6, rook e1, a mate threat has been given. Queen c5, a nice defense, brilliant. So now, yes, there is no checkmate and white is in a crushing position. One option looks like rook c8 followed by d6. Direct d6 also makes good sense. And where does the knight go after rook c7? It has no move, though it's not attacked, but rook c7 and d6, quite a few options. Queen into a6 is now not possible because of queen f2 with serious threats, but even permitting queen f2 is not all that impossible. For queen f2 there is h4, but one would like to avoid that. White is winning on board 3. Fourth board, the tactical move. We were at this stage. White did play knight g5 and then came queen h4. Okay, I thought rook e7 is a better move. She wants to play it safe, queen h4. Okay, rook e7 really was better. Okay, let's come here. Because it would be in one's interest to play d5, rook e7 seemed more simple than putting the queen at an awkward position and struggling for knight f7 check, and knight into d6 can be a possibility. Let's now see if there are any combinations coming. Knight f7 check, king g7, knight into d6, bishop into d6, bishop d4 check. Black goes king h6, bishop e3 check, bishop f4. Yeah, black has chosen a dangerous path, but if white is not able to guard the knight well. If white has to play knight f7 check and knight into e5, then white is losing. So, but a risky situation, because there are different options like knight f7 check and knight e6 can be met with rook f, yeah, knight e6 and knight into d4 is also quite irritating. Here somehow, perhaps I was wrong in the analysis, but I thought rook e7 was the intended move. Looked very strong. Instead she played queen h4, now queen c4 check. And knight e6 instead of knight f3. Knight f3 is natural, but after rook into f3, it leads to a very complex position again. Rook into f3, g into f3, queen into h3, f4. Black wins with queen g4 check. So knight f3, rook f3, g f3, queen h3, f4, and we have even bishop into f4 works. No, bishop into f4, bishop d4 check. So yeah, we have straightforward variation here. Knight f3, rook f3, g f3, queen h3, f4, queen g4 check, and queen into h4, queen into f4, threatening mate. So knight f3 is ruled out, knight is attacked, bishop c1 is generally ruled out for basic principles. So knight f7 check, king g7 is awkward because the combination knight into d6 doesn't work. Knight f7 check, king g7, knight into d6, bishop into d6, bishop d4 check, king h6, bishop g7 check, king g5, and black is king h5 perhaps, g4 check, king g5, queen d5 check. Yes, a very complex possibility, but doesn't seem to work. I think white has to really work very hard calculating this variation. Not a right. What move has been played here? Yeah, okay, king h8. White is thinking of knight f7 or knight e6. I think with this sort of time, perhaps nf7 check and n into d6 is not called for. A simpler option could be knight e6. nf7 check, king g7, knight d6, bishop d6, bishop d4 check, king goes to h6, bishop goes to g7 check, attacking the queen, king h6, and there, even the f8 rook is hanging, so king h6, g4 check, king g5, queen d5 check, bishop e5, bishop into e5. I think if white is winning, then white is going to play that. So white wants to be sure, 0.00. So we have no clue of what has happened in the game. Obviously white has made a move, the board has not been updated. How did white win a piece? I had missed a move here. Knight h4 check, rook into h4, knight, oh no, exchange sacrifice. Okay, white wants to play ambitiously, win an exchange. What could be the logic behind this? I was wondering if this is also good. If rook h7 followed by queen h4 looked very dangerous. I would prefer the f7 square be guarded with the rook h7, and then move the queen to g5 or h4. But rook h8 was played, so there is no direct threat against white pieces. But what does white do? Black will eventually play rook f8 and queen g5. White king is weak and black should be in a good position now. A hasty sacrifice perhaps by white. Here is, I think there's hardly anything possible. Do we have a result? White just queens the pawn and white has a piece up and no play is required, but I don't see a result yet. So white plays a8 and probably Avinash would resign. That looks like a logical consequence. Yes, here we have some progress, a typical Soviet school play. rook e7, rook f5 was another option, queen b5, and now queen d5. Black's pieces are have been pushed back, and now rook d1, rook d3, rook f3, as we discussed, becomes a plan. Black gets completely tied down. With rook on f3, black still has reasonable moves. Black could play queen b6 and keep on moving queen b6 and queen c7. But yes, to be tied down this way is not what one would like. Another option is if white gets rook d3 and rook f3, black could even keep on playing rook d7 and rook e7 as long as the bishop is not attacked. So nothing serious is happening at the moment, but black is tied down, or they agreed to a draw. Okay, fine. So white got good technical advantage of a strong bishop against a weak bishop, but black defended everything and the game ended in a draw. A typical game. Dipan's, yes, Dipan Chakravarti is completely winning, as we can see. Black has given up various pawns and has lost the piece anyway. Even the d7 bishop is in trouble, and f7, queen g7, so many options. Black should lose this game in general. Vianney Kunna. Oh, we got a standard end game where nothing can happen. Yeah, we had this boring rook ending, which nothing was happening, and black simplifies. Good play by black, so nothing is going to happen. So draw is logical. If black moves back the rook, white can even play g4. Rather, white wants to play g4 here and simplify further. I think players will soon agree to a draw. And now the interesting position where Ratnakaran is close to a victory. Oh, he has already won the game. Fine. Queen b8 check and knight h5 check. Black got mated. Oh, this is the position where we were there. White moved queen b2, threatening queen h8 check. Is a better move than what I analyzed. Surely a strong move. And queen into d1, I think too ambitious, because when you take a rook offered by your opponent and your own king is your opponent is giving a rook and also allowing you to give queen f3 check and mating attack, so you should be more careful. Why is my opponent giving me this piece? And there is a checkmate taking place. So king e7 would be met with king e7, queen into c7 check first, and then the same mate would take place. So king g7, and then comes knight h5 check. If king h6, queen h8 mate, and if king h7, then knight ef6 check, followed by mate on h8. So it's going to be a rapid mate, mate in 1 or mate in 2, depending on what you play, mate in 2. So nice game by Ratnakaran, and a player who has made several who has produced several interesting sacrifices and attack, a master of tactical play, has gone to the next round with 100% score, 3 out of 3. Let's go back to game 1. Game 1 ended in a draw. Game 2, Savchenko. Okay, something wrong with this game. Game is at the same stage. Third game. Okay, I think the games haven't progressed. Let us find out. Okay, these positions are the same. Let's try to refresh and see if something different happens. Board 1 drawn, board 2 queen d5. Okay, so well, we'll wait for the moves to occur. The most interesting seems to be the game of PV Nandita. At this moment, there were more interesting games, but now This is the most interesting position. Yes, I think we are stuck somewhere. So very interesting. Round 3, we'll wait for the moves to appear. The second edition of the International Grandmaster Tournament. First one was in 2022, and this is now the second one. This is being played at the IPS Academy, and okay, we got the moves on one board, which means we have moves on the other board as well. So let's quickly come to the top boards. Rather than 6 board, let's go to board 2. A solid pawn up for white, and white is probably going to play f3 and g4 soon. Seems to be a very difficult position, although just 1 pawn down, but presence of opposite color bishops makes it difficult to win many times. So it's still, the danger of draw is not gone. Let's see what. First thing, I think white should try to put king e3 and king f4, and then thereafter g4 would be strong. While black pawns are really weak, one doesn't have to play g4 also. King f4 would threaten the pawn, and then bishop g3 and release the rook, and we see excellent chances for Savchenko to win this game. Let's move to the board 3. Okay, we have some drastic things happening since we left this. So a5 was played, a waiting move, and queen b6. Simple. I think I'm amazed at the simplicity of white's play. It's, I think, excellent. It's playing excellent moves, and the b pawn is going to be a very dangerous pawn. Although objectively this pawn cannot be guarded, but I think he's planning rook c6 here, and if you take, then the d6 would queen the pawn. So how does he guard the pawn? What does he have on mind? Rook c6. A nice tactical move. That is the entire idea. White has been playing for this idea. a6 and rook d1, queen b6. Black is happy that black is winning this pawn, but white comes up with this. It solves a problem of losing the pawn, but the procedure of moving the rook to f6 and activating the knight and to eventually get b7 is going to take some time. So let's see. a5, knight e2. He wants to leave the rook there. Yeah, knight e2. So he has no intention of moving the rook at all, but it sort of cripples black's pieces. Black's pieces, knight on h5. As soon as knight h5 is played, white rook could go to c8, and then there could be some dangerous threats. At the moment, white wants to play knight c3 or something. So white is winning this. Nilas and Andida. Okay, something drastically happened, and okay, he played knight f7 check finally, and knight into d6. This is a variation we are analyzing. Bishop into d6, bishop into d4 check, king h6 versus bishop g7 check, and extremely complex lines. Rook f6. Black wants to play it safe. So here one would have 3 pawns against bishop. So black has not played ambitiously. Perhaps it wasn't working, or white found a simpler way of simplifying the position. White is okay with a draw here, but yeah, 3 pawns should be good enough to make a draw. Let us see if there is a tactical possibility. No possibility at the moment. There is no dangerous option for white. Black is ready to move the king, but where we don't know. Queen f4 is always met with g3. So, well, material is balanced. Black is out of, well, black is obviously out of danger, but white also will be able to hold this game most probably. White's position at one time it looked dangerous. It's no more so. Here we have a lot of things happening, and black forcing the queen exchange with rook f8. Now white has to give up pawns after pawns. So rook a8 and rook into a2. White was knight into c6 probably. White is trying to exchange a few pawns and make a draw. Doesn't seem to be a realistic way of playing. Rooks, knight into c6 is going. King f4 looks like a natural move, or rook a8. Two options: rook a8, knight into c6, rook into a2, knight d4. White hopes to exchange all the pawns. White, if the black pawns are lost, then it would be a draw. Well, I think this is being played out of inertia, and it's just impossible that there could be any result other than a white win, and simplest being h4 and g3, and then target the g6 pawn. So simplest would be h4, then g3, then after the pawns are exchanged, knight on f3, take the king to a stronger square, bishop to b3, bishop to e8 perhaps if the king moves. Also, keeping the pawn on white squares and taking the king straight to d5 is a good idea. And you don't need pawns on black squares if you are a piece up. So okay, but the game is going to be played for some time. This game ended in a draw, we already saw. Okay, Dipan Chakravarti had only a technical play, rook c5 check, and so many other moves, rook a6 check, rook into d7. So black has resigned here. I think a draw has been made. 10th board, Ratnakaran has already won. Yeah. So how many games are left now? I think we are almost at the end of the close of the session. First board drawn. Second board, white is better. This is going to go long. This game is going to be played long, and this one will be a win in another few moves. This is going to go long as well. Yeah. So the lot of interesting possibilities were seen today. A lot of interesting games by top players in the tournament, and quite a few surprising results as well. So a very interesting battle has now begun. A 9-round tournament or 10-round tournament. This is a 10-round tournament which gives fair chances for a Grandmaster norm to the players who are not Grandmaster. This is the second edition of the Indore International Grandmaster Chess Tournament, and we see that it has attracted as many as 10 Grandmasters, 2 women Grandmasters, and 25 International Masters. International Masters are the one who are aspirant of Grandmaster norms, and they need tournaments where they have a realistic possibility of making the norms, which means that there should be a lot of Grandmasters and there should be a lot of players above 2000. This tournament has been restricted to the players above rating 2000. So there's excellent chance of making a norm, and some of the international masters are at their best, because it's an opportunity to make a Grandmaster norm if they play well. And that's how we see a lot of fighting games. We're going to see another 6 days, we'll have up to 16th, we have a lot of games. This tournament is being held at IPS Academy, Indore, and it is 16 countries are being represented and 4 continents. From South America, we have a player from Peru. From North America, we have a player from USA, and we have Ukraine, Uzbekistan, and so many other players. Asia, from Africa, we have Egypt and many other countries. We have players from Iran, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. 16 countries, 131 players, and so many Grandmasters. More than 50% are title holders. Out of 131, I think 66 players have international titles. So others have only international rating, about 2000, but more than half of the players have international titles. The tournament is being sponsored by Indore West Management, Red Cross Society, Path Foundation, Navin Florin, Goyal Group, HDFC Bank, Dilip Buildcon, Kirloskar Brothers and Mega Developers. There could be some smaller sponsors as well, but a great tournament in the city which is being awarded the cleanest city of India for last 6 years, and the city has just entered the 7th year. Let's see if it gets the award, but a beautiful venue at the IPS Academy is there, and excellent weather, European standards. So games have now started going into the best of its phase. Round 4 to 9 will be the best part of the tournament, where players will try to win each and every game and will really find a lot of surprise results, brilliant games, beautiful results, unexpected results. And last round is always something which leads to uncertainty, players trying to make Grandmaster norm, players trying to win the title and different considerations, and yet a lot of things happening only on the strength of the ability of the player on that day. So how you play on a particular day, on a particular moment, that decides. The leader after 3 rounds need not be a leader after 4 rounds. The leader after the penultimate round often doesn't win the championship, somebody else becomes. So we're going to watch these interesting matches for another 6 days and 7 more rounds in 6 days. So we'll meet tomorrow at 2 p.m. in the evening and 2 p.m. in the afternoon and watch the games. Thank you all for watching. See you tomorrow.